you are constantly working on yourself, whether it's health, relationships, impact, you're constantly working for yourself. So it seems like you're doing it in all areas of your life. Which area did it start in? Which areas did it evolve to?
Like many of the most amazing things in my life, they were born of misery. And I was deeply and profoundly unhappy, dissatisfied with who I was, what I was capable of, where I was in life, all of it. I was just really unhappy about it. Now, the one good thing is I've always met things like that with, and what can I do? And I have a bias towards action. Then I've cultivated that bias towards action, which is how it's gotten extreme and is permeated into every area of my life. Okay, so it starts with it's this dark place. This, like I said, I failed in film school. I didn't fail in film school. I graduated second in my class, but there was a failure that was so emotionally catastrophic that everybody else would have been like, oh, you got a B, like what's the problem? Sure, I got a B in the class, but I didn't walk away with a thesis film that I could use to get a job as a filmmaker. So for me, it was like, whoa, I just lost massively. So I'm in this very dark place. I'm broke as the day is long. I can't afford furniture. I literally sit on the floor in my unfurnished apartment. You know, just it's a normal phase that people go through, but then put on top of that I'm feeling down and stuck, like I don't know where I'm gonna go. Propensity towards action kicks in. I start reading. I'm learning about the brain, figuring out how much of this can I change. I realize I can change it. And then that change felt so good. Let's do a thought exercise. If you are in a dark place and you hear change is real, change is possible, doesn't that lift your mood? Don't you want that to be true? And once you allow it, because you have to allow it, once you allow that to lift your mood and you're like, I feel better just by thinking I can change. That was huge for me. That was like moment one was when I realized I actually can change. So this thing that feels like a death threat, this like smothering cloud of just like despair, it can clear away. And it immediately, and it's not like, oh, it went from gray skies to blue skies. It wasn't that immediate, but it literally immediately a lighter load just because I realized I can change. So I was like, whoa, I can change. None of this is a death sentence. That's so like just amazing. That was enough to get me going. And people are always looking for, how do I have that energy? I'm depressed. I'm down on myself. How do I get the energy to push through? Man, you've got to find a way to find energy in that. You can change. So whatever position you're in right now, you can change no matter what it is, no matter how horrific, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done. Like there is a way out from under it. But part of it is allowing that sense of lightness to be there. So I allowed it. And so it began to lift off my shoulders, which then encouraged me to take more action, to read more, to get better. I started my obsession with gaining skills, that reading isn't about checking a box. It's about actually getting better at something that lets you do something. And I need a better way to explain this. This is one of those things, like if people really understood what I'm talking about right now, this one fact would change their life forever. You don't get skills because it looks good on a resume. You get skills because it lets you do the thing you want to do. So let's use sports as an example. It's just all too easy not to use it. So if you're in poverty and you're Lionel Messi and you realize, actually, I think, who's the other one?
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo, thank you. So Cristiano Ronaldo, in the grips of poverty, realizes that playing soccer is a way out for him. And so he goes and gets the skills. Why? Because if he can win on the soccer field, then he can actually elevate his family out of poverty. Like when you see that trail, it goes back to the Nietzsche quote. If you have a why, you can survive almost any how. So how am I going to get there? The amount of work that Cristiano Ronaldo has put in to become one of the greatest, if not the greatest football player of all time, it's inhuman. Anybody else would look at it and say, nope, not willing to do that. And fair enough. But it was somebody who said, if I gain these skills, it will let me dribble around people, score when other people can't score, galvanize a team around me, leverage it to be wanted by teams, to turn into financial resources, to make me famous so that I can get brand deals and things like that. All the things that he would need to do to pull himself out of poverty. Like this stuff isn't an accident. It's about skill acquisition. So there's another kid that had the same dream. I'm going to use soccer to get me out of poverty and did nothing about it. Therefore did not have the skills, therefore could not elevate their family out of poverty, and looks at it like, well, this is all circumstance. It's not circumstance. It's cause and effect. It's how much energy do you put into actually gaining the skills, and did you gain them? Or did you just put in the energy and the effort thinking that should be enough to gain it, but you didn't actually gain them? It's like the gift I want everybody to receive is you can get good at anything you set your mind to, but do you actually set your mind to it? Do you have that inhuman level of follow through? Do you keep pushing and fighting long after it stopped being fun, deep into boredom, because you have a why? You know why you're doing what you're doing, and you're just driving towards that. And when you have that, you can accomplish this extraordinary stuff. But I really think people now are doing it for the gram. You're doing it for the gram. You want to go to that thing and do it because it's like, oh, this is going to look good on my gram. And look, I've done that 100 times. I get it. But at the core of my existence is not that. At the core of my existence is I'm going to, in the amount of time that I have, I'm going to be acquiring skills. Now, to acquire those skills, going back to what you were asking me, it's like you have to be self-aware. So as a part of the formula of knowing that skills have utility, that I can put that utility to the test in service of something bigger than myself that helps other people, makes me have meaning and purpose, also helps me generate finances, do the things that I want in my life, all of that. But it comes down to that acquiring those skills. So going into something, knowing that like, oh my God, okay, first it lightens my load a little bit because I realize I can change. Then I realize these skills actually have utility. They're gonna let me do stuff. So now I really wanna go hardcore into that. And so I poured my attention and energy into making that emotionally rewarding. We all get to decide. In fact, I will be writing a book about this. Right. We all get to decide what our values are, what our belief system is, what our rules in life are, the code of ethics that we live by. Those are all decisions that people mistake for empirical truth. But if you want to know how just unempirically true it is, look across all societies, they don't share it. We just decide that stuff. It's usually handed to us by our parents, which is what makes us confuse it with just being true. But the reality is that we're all constructing this belief system, value system, honor code, all of it. And it's going to determine what we do and how we do it. Now, if you choose to breathe life into, from a value and belief standpoint, putting in that work to get those skills, then suddenly that energy of like, whoa, this is gonna let me do something that lets me serve, all of a sudden, like, wow, that's uplifting in and of itself. So you feel good as you're doing it. Now, as you're feeling better about it, you're gonna wanna do it more. And so that became that self-reinforcing loop of, I want to do this more, but to do it more, I have to become aware of my blind spots. And that's where self-awareness comes in. But just like any other skill, like you have to cultivate it, you have to get better at it, you have to seek disconfirming evidence, you have to come to realize where you have been blind. Now, often those moments where we realize that we've been blind, they're emotionally devastating. So the one going back to film school, in creating that final thesis film, the realization, the removal of the scales from my eyes was to realize I did not yet have talent as a filmmaker. Now, I didn't know the word yet at the time, so I just, felt like a forever. But it was like, that's the truth. I did not yet have talent. Okay, well, at least now I know. Now I can address it. Had I known that on an earlier film, I wouldn't have made the mistakes on my thesis film because I would have known I'm not John Woo, I'm Alfred Hitchcock, and the night and day difference with which they approached films. And so what I had to learn as a creator was, oh, I'm Alfred Hitchcock. I have to plan everything to the nth detail because I can't think fast enough to do it on the fly. I have horrible spatial relations. Film, oddly enough, is massively about spatial relations. So like being able to hold that in my head, I can't. So I have to get a computer program. I have to literally do what are called animatics if I want to shoot a film. So the next film that I directed, I animatic the whole thing out, literally. Every shot, camera angle, lens choice, everything was made in like 2 months leading up to the shoot. And then on the shoot, it was just like, what does my animatic say? Oh, it says the camera's gonna move from here to here. We're gonna be on a 35mm lens. It's gonna be at 4'7". It was all mapped out. So I could watch it and say, is it working or not? Because I can't hold that in my head. That's a limitation of me. Okay, fair enough. But like that self-awareness allowed me to address it with a set of skills, which was animatics. So that's my like whole obsession. But it's like you can train even self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's often gonna come from pain. The biggest thing is if you're trying to march down a path of self-improvement without clarity, without a terrifying level of clarity, you're never gonna make it. So start there. What do you want exactly? What skill, what trait, what ability, what belief, what are you trying to make yours?
Notice he did not say a thing there, right? Like you said, what ability, what trait, what quality, ever say what house, what car.
Lambo,
yeah, right. It's important.
Yeah,
because I think it's such an important point that you made, that you did not let that word even come into a list, and you named like 7 things and it didn't come in. Because when I started self-improvement, so much of what I heard in the West was always about a vision board of having stuff. And it was like, put a picture of that ideal house, put a picture of that car. And I've always struggled with that being the object of obsession. So I'm glad you didn't bring it up.
Part of it is because I certainly don't want to be disingenuous. Like, there are also material things that I chase and am inspired by and all that, for sure. I just come at it from a like, what's the skill that I'm gonna need, even if that ultimately is where I wanna get. It's like, all of that stuff people will find, and God, I hope people have heard this 1,000 times. It's so transient. It is never going to fulfill you, right? But it's still fun. Go ahead, chase it, have fun. Like, I get it. You will ultimately come back to something more meaningful, for sure. So once you know what you want, you have that level of clarity. Now it's about, okay, where am I in that? And that's where it requires that you have self-awareness to know where you are in developing that skill. So if you, one, are willing to be honest with yourself, you've already won. The single most important part in learning to be honest with yourself is to accept that you must have self-esteem. And the problem is most people build their self-esteem around something stupid. So most people build their self-esteem around being right, being good, being smart, being worthy, and they see all of those as permanent traits. And so anything that challenges them being smart, which is my big one. Oh God, even to this day, if I really want to get into a bad place, I'll just go hang around people that are just legitimately smarter than me and then focus on how cool being smart is. Now I can be around them when I value myself for being the learner, but the second I let myself slip into just wanting to be cool for being smart, then being around those people is like getting kicked in the face. It sucks, man. And so I went through this phase in my life that I call the king of remedial jobs phase. And so this is post film school, post like realizing that I don't have talent. I just need to be smart, man. I just need to build myself back up by being smart. And so I would apply for jobs. Like I sold video games retail. I sold insurance door to door. I did anything that I could where I knew that the person interviewing me at some point during the interview was going to say, why are you applying for this job? Like, you're too smart for this. And be like, I'm right where I need to be, which is crazy and sad, but absolutely true. And so I did that for a couple years. And in that phase, I just didn't want my intelligence to be challenged. So flash forward now, I'm working with these two entrepreneurs. They hire me as a copywriter. I'm in an entrepreneurial environment for the first time, and they're clearly smarter than me. That isn't even up for debate. And I'm arguing with them for this idea because I needed to win. I couldn't take another time where it's like, they're smarter than me, they're smarter than me. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna win on this idea. And somewhere in the argument, I realized I was wrong. And there was a voice in my head screaming, you're wrong, dude. You are wrong. You know you're wrong. Shut up. Like, stop pushing for this. What are you doing? And I kept going, and I finally like whittled them down, and they finally just gave up. And so they said, yep, we'll do it your way. Fine, whatever. And right then and there, it's the one time in my life that was truly a lightning rod moment where my life can be divided before and after. And that moment was realizing that I was telling everybody that I wanted to get rich, but the way I was acting was like I just wanted to feel smart. And I thought, hey, no judgment. I'm totally cool. Whichever it is, like, we can craft a life where that will be wonderful. So if what you really want is to just be smart and to feel smart all the time, you have to quit. You've got to get out of this environment because they make you feel stupid all the time. And that's not a great place to be. Feeling badly about yourself all the time for any reason, even if it's self-inflicted, it's not a bad scenario, or it's not a good scenario. You've got to get out of it. So I was like, okay, so that's option one, get out of this scenario, go back to being the king of remedial jobs. Or if you actually want to get rich, start acting in accordance with it. Start making decisions based on that. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to give up my self-esteem. I'm going to have to like stop worrying about feeling good about myself. And I was like, ooh, that is clearly a losing proposition. There's no way to come in and feel horrible every day and think that I will have the energy to see this through. So I was like, God, what else could I do? And I was like, well, I guess I could build my self-esteem around something that is sort of impervious to being around people that are smarter than me. And what would that be? Being the learner. And I thought, okay, well, I could choose to do that. I could choose to build my self-esteem around being not right, but finding the right answer. Not being smart, but working hard to learn. And so that became just like the core of my existence. I decided in that moment, I'm going to start valuing myself for how rapidly I can admit when I'm wrong. How much I learn, how much time and energy I put into learning. And once I switched that and I switched my identity and my behaviors around to being the learner, then all of a sudden, everything changed. And that's when I went on hockey stick growth, because all of a sudden, if we were arguing and I realized you were right, I'd be like, dude, he's right. You're totally right. I see it. Oh my God, thank you so much. And so I started earning a reputation of I never just backed into a corner. I never argued for something just because it was my idea. I was legitimately on the hunt to find the right answer. And so now I'm getting the internal feedback of, hey, you said that you were going to always focus on being the learner. You're doing it. You said you'd always admit when you're wrong. And I would try to shorten that timeline down. So I wasn't like taking an hour to finally admit it, or even 3 minutes, that I was trying to get to it. Like, dude, if I realize I was wrong, 3 seconds, 30 seconds max, like I'm, just finally saying it. Look, you're totally right. I'm with you. Yep, I see it. And then the world was like, whoa, working with this guy is awesome. He's not trying to take credit for other people's ideas. He will change on what he was saying in a heartbeat when he fights for what he believes in, but the second you can convince him, he's convinced, and then he moves on. And it just became a really awesome environment.
Wow.
So that was hugely transformative, but it forces you to constantly be on the lookout for, where am I wrong? You can decide what to value. And so this is another part of it. It's not really self-awareness, but this is another part of the rebuilding process of somebody that wants to completely transform who they are. You have to change your identity. So who am I? I'm the smart guy. And that's how I thought of myself. Like, I thought of myself as being smart. And then the life slapped me around and I realized, oh, wow, I'm really actually not that smart. I just grew up in a small town. And so in my small town, I was smart enough. I was still never the smartest. But then I moved to LA, and all of a sudden fucking people smarter than me were just like growing on trees. So I was like, wow, I really don't feel smart anymore. So that was like a hard adjustment. And so then putting myself into these smaller and smaller rooms was the solution. I realized that I had been sort of taken as a default value intelligence. Maybe it was the family I grew up in or the movies I watched, I don't know. But I just had this default that being smart was the thing everyone should chase. And then I realized, oh, I can actually change that. Not everybody values themselves for that. And so I could swap that out with something else. And I want people to understand that those things that are just deeply within you that seem as if they are innate human qualities, challenge them all. Some things you won't be able to change, but some things are far more malleable than you thought. And a lot of what you value comes down to what you repeat. And so just repeating myself, I'm the learner, I'm the learner, I'm the learner. It began to be my identity, and then rewarding myself emotionally when I did that, repeating it, rewarding, repeating, rewarding. Then it's like through that repetition cycle, it actually starts to be meaningful that you're the learner. And by the way, I was telling everybody, I'm the learner. I see myself as the learner. I'm the learner. I'm the learner. And because I was telling people, then I really felt the sense of congruence with wanting to act like the learner. And so when you say you're going to do something and you do it, you earn self-credibility. So now I've got this loop going. I said I was the learner. Here I am reading this book. Here I am being willing to admit when I'm wrong, seeking out knowledge, looking for disconfirming evidence. Like, I get to feel good about myself for that. And that cycle of getting good at emotionally rewarding, and if your audience is ready for this, emotionally punishing yourself. And knowing that it's got to be never more than an 80-20 split. You can never be like a 70-30 and spending 30% of your time in the negative. You just can't. It's just something about the human being. And is it actually 20? It feels ballpark there. But like, if you think about, you should be spending at least 4 more times thinking about all the things you're doing well, all the good things you're bringing into this world, the things you're grateful for, spending at least 4 more times amount of your time there than you do the negative stuff, the things you're doing wrong, the things that you can improve. And just the easy barometer is, even if you have to take it down to a point of, 0.1% of time in the negative, it's the way to know if you're spending too much or too little is the second something begins to chip away at who you are and what you think about yourself, stop. Because all of this should be building you up. Even the things that I'm saying to myself, I'm not doing well at that, I have like protection from, and that's okay because you're the learner. I'm not good at that yet. Like, I'm so hardcore about things like that I make sure that I always remind myself that just because I'm not good at it yet doesn't mean that I'm not going to get good at it. So you start reinforcing that, and you really can begin to build yourself up, these beliefs and habits and routines and core values, identity. It's all malleable.
When you're building that, how do you build it without letting that then become negative judgment on yourself? Or every time you're questioning yourself, or you're okay with being wrong, how are you stopping that from being so heavy?
Yeah, this is where rules come in. So the way that I view myself is like Voltron. I'm all these like random bits and pieces that come together to make a whole. But the reality, when people look at me or they look at my success, what you're seeing is my identity, my values, my beliefs, my rules, my habits, and my routines. They've all come together and they form a set of behavior, a set of seeking skills and working hard and wanting to impact and touch lives and to be a good partner to my wife and all of that. That's what you see, but it's all things that I very consciously and very routinely comb over, prune what's not working, add something new as I learn it. That is, at the end of the day, you have to have a rule that you don't do anything that diminishes yourself. For instance, if I'm in a dark place, I'm gonna spend 0% of my time punishing myself, right? Because it doesn't make sense. So one of my like guiding principles is never do anything that diminishes you, and then never do anything that moves you away from your goal. So again, goal, you have to have that clarity. So I know what I'm trying to do. Okay, well, if I know what I'm trying to do, does beating myself up over this, is that gonna help me or hurt me? Oh, it's gonna hurt me because I'm gonna be more likely to slide toward depression, to think less of myself, to be less bold, to take less action. Oh, okay, well then we're not going to do that. And I don't think people have researched cognitive behavioral therapy nearly enough. Pattern interrupting is like everything. Get better at pattern interrupting than LeBron is at shooting. Like you just have to be a ninja. Like you've got to be so hardcore. You've got to know about how to do that with yourself. So if I have a negative thought that's recurring, I just tell myself, nope, you can't think this anymore. So, and every time it will come up, because I can't stop myself from it popping up into my conscious mind, but you absolutely can control how the next thought goes. The next thought can be, oh, and here's what I'll do with a negative thought. That's so rad. I'm so glad this negative thought appeared in my mind, because that reminds me to be grateful for the fact that I'm friends with Jay Shetty. Or that reminds me to be grateful for the fact I have a marriage that is so insanely cool that like I legitimately some days have to stop myself from just curling up in a ball with her and just chilling all fucking day. Even now, Jay, it's so funny. I had to stop and think, wait, I'm going through this list of things that I'm grateful for. What started this? And I'm like, oh yeah, the negative thought. Like that actually just happened to me right now. Yeah. So you can imagine in real life when like you train yourself, every time the negative thought kicks up, don't sit in the emotion of the negativity that it will bring. Instead, use it as a habit loop trigger to think about something you're grateful for. And at first, it feels so awkward and it's like the negative thought just keeps coming back. But if you're diligent and suddenly negative thoughts become a habit loop trigger to gratitude, to positivity, to repeating your rules about I don't allow myself to think things that tear me down, so I'm not gonna think about that. Even just saying that crowds out that thought and telling other people that, hey, this is what you're doing. It is unbelievable. But this is why I'm saying I'm literally just a patchwork of all these like tools and techniques that allow me to protect myself from negative self-talk, from anxiety, from depression. I don't think I've ever officially been in depression, but I've been super fucking close enough to know the feeling of staring into the void, which I don't think is accurate. It feels like the void is collapsing in around you and just everything is meaningless and it is all utterly hopeless. And I've had just enough of a glimpse of how hopeless that is to get where people are in those moments. But anxiety, that I've been in the thick of. So that one I know, and I've used CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to do interrupts on that. I have a very well-developed negative voice, so I have had to use tools and techniques to stop that. I never would have become a successful entrepreneur if I couldn't learn to self-soothe. And at one point, that was what I would have said was my secret power. That my secret power in business was I can self-soothe faster than anybody else.
You're like, you can self-heal, like Wolverine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. I have to start bringing out the comic book references.
I loved it. It was good.
Actually, hearing that, I so believe that's where everyone should start, because that is a skill. Even though it's not your superpower right now, that is a skill that's going to last you forever.
For sure.
And it will apply to everything, whether you do business or relationships or whatever you're going to end up doing. That's like the one skill that's just self-healing, self-soothing. I love that. Thank you, man. That was amazing.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. That's the best I've ever heard it explained. Go and learn the skill. And we take it for granted. Everyone's like, yeah, I meditate for 10 minutes a day now. And it's cool. I'm not criticizing anyone who does 10 minutes a day, but I'm like, if you really want that benefit that Tom's talking about, it's going to take a bit more effort.
Oh, yes.
And take a bit more work.
And constantly, and it never goes away. It does get easier for sure.
Yeah.
But because it becomes your default reaction, but it's never going to go away.
You'll never get rid of the negative thought. You'll only think about it for less time.
Right.
You can't get rid of it. And I think that's the problem. We're all trying to get rid of stuff. So don't be worried if you have negative thoughts. With these tools that Tom's been sharing, just find a way to let it sit in your brain for less time.